Okay, so now that we've touched briefly on how we can start to do some visual styling, I want to talk a little bit about how we can add interactivity. So the first thing to note is that in order for the page to understand, so we have this web page that ends with .html. So we still have to signal to the page and to the browser when we want it to be doing something different than looking for HTML. Now, HTML pages were designed to do this. This is sort of part of the early structure that they were given. And so one of the things we have available to us is something called a script tag. And as you may be able to infer from the name, the script tag is where we get to write JavaScript. Okay? And JavaScript, most fundamentally, is what lets us deal with data. It lets us manipulate data, and it lets us create interactivity, like, for example, cause something to happen when somebody mouses over something, or lets us load data when somebody clicks a button. It's what makes things move on the web page for the most part. So JavaScript is, of course, a very important part of our visual communications where any sort of interactivity is involved. And for us, it's almost always involved, at least in the respect that we are, because we tend to work with a fair amount of data, relatively speaking, that we want to be able to load data in from elsewhere, right? And we want to be able to manipulate it. So the very, very basic thing that we're going to look at right now, just to prove that we can create interactivity with JavaScript, is we're going to look at an alert message. Now, alert is a special kind of, it's what we sometimes call a keyword or a reserved word. It's a special command, right? So there are, there are special words there are words that are special in JavaScript. They have a particular meaning. They do special things that the computer is looking for. And so, they have kind of built-in awareness. The computer has a built-in awareness of how to deal with them, much the way that we all have different skills that we already sort of understand, right? So if I tell you to type something into the computer, I don't have to explain to you how to type. That's an action that you understand how to perform. So alert in this case is actually JavaScript that the computer already knows how to interpret. So I'm just going to say, hi there, and I'm going to have to put this in double quotes, and we will talk about why that is in just a second. So you see alert, and in double quotes we see hi there, and you're going to notice that there is a semicolon on the end of this, right? The semicolon is in programming, and pretty much any time we're on the web, whether we're dealing with CSS or JavaScript, that is the equivalent of our period, okay? That is what ends the statement and says, I'm done with this part for now. So again, I'm going to put in this alert, I put in this string, okay, I put in this green text, so surrounded by double quotes, called hi there. It says hi there, and I put the semicolon on the end. And again, we'll talk about the structure of why that works the way it does in just a moment. So now I'm going to come back to my now beautiful web page, and I'm going to reload it, and oh, there you go. It says the page at file localhost says hi there. Okay, so this is not very exciting, and popping up a dialog box that says hi there is probably not our idea of great interactivity. In fact, it's probably some of the worst interactivity one can experience on the internet. However, it does prove that we can create interactivity with JavaScript. But in order to create interesting interactivity with JavaScript, we're going to have to learn how to move beyond the sort of built-in tasks that JavaScript already understands how to do, that the browser already understands how to interpret, because how are we going to create something that's customized and interesting if, if we're only relying on the things that it already knows how to do? So it's kind of like, it's kind of like if you had to write an article using only Mad Libs, only filling in bits and pieces of a sentence, of a pattern that was handed to you. You wouldn't end up with very interesting articles, right? And that's the same thing for JavaScript. We want to get a little bit more comfortable. We want to get more proficient with this language so that we can create things that are customized to do and show and behave just how we want them to. So in order to do that, of course, we are going to begin at the beginning, as we would with any language, and we are going to look at the parts of speech. Now, there are approximately 5 parts of speech, in JavaScript, and we are going to take a look at them right now. We'll do a little preview here. The parts of speech in JavaScript, as we see, in English, we have a person, place, or thing as a type of noun. We have 5 types of nouns in JavaScript. We have numbers, strings, booleans, arrays, and objects. Now, before you worry about that, take a look at this slide. This is showing you, and you guys will have access to this, this is a demonstration of the 5 types of nouns that are available in JavaScript, okay? We have numbers. We have something called a boolean, which is basically whether something is true or false. Those are the only 2 things it can be. We have things that are enclosed by double quotation marks, okay, and those are strings. When we see brackets with commas, those are lists or arrays. And then we have something called objects, which we see which are designated by curly braces. Okay, so let's put this into perspective a little bit. Back here, in my HTML, I created a div. And we noted that a div is basically an empty container, okay? It's an empty visual container. In JavaScript, we need the ability to create containers as well because we need those containers to contain things like data, mostly data, that we might manipulate or need to reference later. And in order to create those, we need a special keyword, and that keyword is var, okay? So we mentioned how div is probably short for division. And the div tag is going to be our primary visual container. When we want to put something on a web page, we're going to use a div tag. It creates an invisible box. We can put things inside that box. We can style that box and use it to create a visual element on the page. When it comes to JavaScript, the var keyword is really our main thing. It's short for variable. And the reason why it's called a variable is precisely because it can start out as one thing and then it can be changed to another thing and updated to another thing. So it is variable, right? We don't necessarily know what it's going to be. We just say we want something here. And what the var keyword does is it creates a container for data, okay? It creates an empty box in the memory of the computer and says, look, I want to, I want to put some stuff in here, and that's where, that's how you can reference it later. So the thing about a variable, if you create a box, how are you going to know where the box is later if you don't label it, okay? So every time we create a variable in our heads, we're thinking, and I'm going to start actually, as I always should do, I am going to start with a comment. Oops. Where's my forward slash? There we go. So, oh, look at that nice comment thing that happens right up front for me in Aptana. So, and Aptana did that for me automatically, that nice comment style. So, I'm going to say create a set of variables each with a different data type. Okay? So, that's me laying out the task that I'm planning to complete, right? That's how we want to start narrating our code. This is how we want to start commenting our code. And so my first variable, like I said, when I create a variable, by giving it that keyword, I said create an empty box in memory. Now, if I ever want to be able to find what's in that box, or like if you have like boxes in a closet, sometimes we have, you put things away, you put them in boxes. And then you go to look for something and you have to like dig through all the boxes and you're tearing stuff out of your closet and throwing it all over your apartment. Good way to avoid that, label the boxes, right? And if you label them descriptively, right? So we can put a label on it and say box 1. Okay, so we can now recognize the difference between box 1 and box 2 that have those 2 separate labels. But it is much more helpful if one of them says, like when you're moving, right? If one of them says kitchen utensils and the other one says bathroom, right? Then it gives you a sense of not only that they are there and that they are distinct, but kind of what's inside them. So I'm going to do that here when I label my first memory box. I'm going to call it sample number because I'm going to put a number in it, okay? So let's just pick apart this statement for a second. Again, this is what we would think of as like a JavaScript sentence, okay? So we're saying, look, create an empty box in memory, that's the variable. I want you to give it the label sample number. And now this equals sign, right? The equal sign we call assignment, okay? Because it says, and this is what I want you to put in the box. This is the thing, the stuff that goes in that box. And in this case, I have handed it the number 24, okay? Just by typing those digits, I've said put the number 24 in there. Now, I can do the same thing, okay, with a string. Okay, now a string is anything that I want to be treated as text, okay, literal text. And again, we see how our typography comes in handy here. So we see that the digits, right, so the variable keyword, right, that special keyword in JavaScript turns this sort of yellow color. The variable name is white. We have, again, this sort of golden color with the equal sign. The digits are this reddish color. We have the green that indicates a string. Okay, I'm going to do another one here. I'm going to say sample Boolean. Okay, and we see that that also, that's a keyword because, again, it turns a special color. What were our other options here for data types? Yes, arrays. Okay, so an array is going to be a list of things. Okay, and you notice that I'm using the camel case that we talked about here. So the way that we tell the computer we want it to keep something as a list is with square brackets. Okay, and we can put into this list anything we want. So I can just start with, I'm going to start with a list of numbers. Okay. And in fact, we could actually mix that up. And so what we're going to do in the next segment is some exercises where we sort of play with how these things work together. Now, the other thing that I can do, the last thing we can look at is sample object, okay? And so an object is going to be denoted by curly braces, right? So when you see curly braces, object, right? Square brackets, array. Double quotes, string. Right? So very simple ways, little punctuation ways to understand what you're looking at. Now in the object is where we're going to see okay, in the sample object is where we're going to see this structure come back that we actually saw up here with the color and border thing, where we see the name, right? And then we see a colon, and then we see the value after that, okay? And then the last thing that I want to point out is that I can create a box and label it and not put anything inside. So I don't actually have to put anything inside right away. So I'm going to say sample variable, okay? And you see, I've said create a box in memory, label it this way, but I haven't told it to put anything inside. And that's perfectly legitimate as well. Now the question is, what happens when I load up my page here? If I reload my page, nothing happens. Well, that shouldn't be surprising to us because JavaScript is not visible, right? We see it only by its result, which is by the way that it affects the page, right? So we can create interactivity, we can use it to manipulate data, but it's only through specific mechanisms that we can actually make it change the value, the visible stuff on the page. So the reason why that looks the same is simply because all of my HTML and my CSS styles have stayed the same. Okay, so we're going to break here. We're going to come back in the next segment and we're just going to start to do a little bit of manipulation, see how these variables can be changed and updated and used to store data and kind of keep track of things as we start getting ready to build stories in JavaScript, right? We've got some basic sentences. Stories are up next.